So week 19 is my last few days at the kibbutz and the painful and lovely goodbyes, and then hitting the road again where the adventure really begins in Israel, a place I wanted to see amongst the Arabs and amongst Jericho and going down to the Dead Sea and going to Jerusalem. So it was quite an adventurous week of transition, and being on the road again was a pure joy. After losing Jim Camper, my buddy who came with me from the kibbutz office in Tel Aviv and stayed with me for some weeks, I was alone in the room, but my buddy Henk, I call him the Dutch boy, he's a Dutch young man, and he actually moved in with me into my room. And I write in my journal, he's a fine fellow, and we fool around with language. It's a gas. Henk has a keen sense of humor and the fun habit of pointing out humorous circumstances by saying to me, look at the picture. He would frame things and it would be just a crack up. He would find these very funny things going on in our midst, which was really cool and really a lot of fun. And Henk and I, we had a great sense of adventure together. And across the road was this Hatzor, this historical dig. And it was an ancient tell. I mentioned it before, but when Henk and I went across the highway, it wound up being a fantastic adventure. In fact, we wound up in a tunnel that led down to the water source of the temple in one of the cities from the 10th century BC. And we climbed around and we got to a point where it got so narrow and so closed in down in the water tunnel that it kind of got scary. But we came out and we came back across the road to the kibbutz. But being in that Hatzor, being amongst the digs, was a magical thing and a fun thing for both Henk and I to adventure together with. Let's take a look together at the incredible Hatzor tell. Stone images near a ravine, a waterfall that was part of the joy of being on the kibbutz. More rocks, he looked like Stonehenge. And here's over at the kibbutz where the lyrical life lies. Because it is a place where maybe 40 or 50 cities over the thousands of years have been developed because it's a water source. There's all kinds of different refined areas and different digs and different things to see in the tell. After our adventure in Hatzor, the tell, we went back to the kibbutz, and of course we had to stop and see our buddy, Clyde the Camel. Well, he got on mounting Clyde, and I got him moving. Then I got on Clyde, and Henk starts this hissing noise, and Clyde takes off across the pen. I held on tight to Clyde's hump. I didn't think he would stop at the iron fence, but he stopped abruptly. Henk started going the other way and hissing again. Clyde went crazy and started running and bucking, and I slid off safely, but I was very shook up. Henk was roaring with laughter. He said, "The expressions on your face." Henk had a pretty good sense of humor. Well, I was kind of scared, poopless, so to speak, but I still loved that Clyde. And I'm telling you, when I left that kibbutz, I missed my buddy because he would blow up that tongue of his and he was still doing it when I left the kibbutz. Henk admitted to me that he had learned a camel call from somebody he knew one time, and it was the hissing sound. And that's what got Clyde all revved up and got me scared. But it was kind of fun and an adventure that I will never forget. One of the cool things about staying on the kibbutz for some time is that you became involved in a project and you could see it unfold as the weeks go by. So one of the products of the kibbutz was chicken, turning baby chicks into full-grown chickens so they can be eaten at market and on the kibbutz for Friday night dinner or whatever. So I participated in actually building. Over a matter of weeks. I would get involved, and we put up wooden sides, and we put up a roof, and we shellacked it, and we put down a floor. And maybe every week or so I would come on and be part of the crew that was involved in the construction of the chicken, the baby chick farm we were going to raise them up from. One eventful day, they brought in a huge truck, and on the truck were these big boxes filled with baby chicks. And then we had the job of unloading the baby chicks. And they came in something similar to what you see behind me. We weren't those masks and things. It wasn't quite that clean, but we did participate in bringing the baby chicks to the floor. So we're unloading these baby chicks. And they came in actually a wooden box, but it wasn't that different than this. And as we got involved, we started unloading these chicks, and they started coming out in thousands and thousands of chickens, baby chicks. And it was actually a much bigger space than this even. And all of a sudden, at one point, when we're unloading these baby chicks, they started coming in droves, like armies of baby chicks. They would kind of work together in unison, and they would go off in one direction. And all of a sudden, they'd be like, thousands of baby chicks would be coming at you. And they started moving around, and it was absolutely a joy to be involved. One thing about the kibbutz is people came and they went, and they kind of came in stages. So as I'm starting to get ready to leave, there's other people who have been there for some weeks, and they're getting ready to leave. I read in my journal on 25 February 1971, things are moving fast around here. Last night, there was a going away party for Lynn, the Maryland student, and Donna, the Aussie nurse. It was truly one of the finest gigs I've ever been to. We sat around continually singing and laughing. Of course, the bowl, that's the hashish bowl, kept moving about, and that didn't hurt any. So many times I was laughing uncontrollably. Me and Bernie, the red-haired and bearded New York Jew who's here with his wife, a little Jewish girl from New York, we were really just kicking out the jams. We'd be singing, making up stuff, Temptations, a lot of Motown, a lot of soul music, and we were having a ball just belting out our song a cappella. It was the magic of a real trip of a day. That night, it's my going away party. And after these howling fun parties, it wound up being a melancholy adventure and just kind of hanging out. It was kind of sad, frankly. I was getting kind of moody. And tomorrow morning, I'm looking forward to going off to the holy city of the Holy Land, Jerusalem. And I'm ready to say farewell to Ayelet HaShachar. It's been a great living experience for me. And it was a real sad farewell. But I went off with Henk in his famous DAF. I had never heard of a Dutch car, nor a Dutch DAF. It was a little tiny car, and myself got in with Henk, and I had Donna, the Australian nurse, and Lynn, the Maryland student, and the four of us got in the vehicle, somehow got our packs in there, and Henk said, "Hey, I'll drive with you. I'm taking a day off, so let's hit the road." And that was amazing, to be in a vehicle and to be moving through the lovely scenery, the breathtaking scenery of the Promised Land. Reds and greens and yellows, the rocks and the mountains were just fantastic. And of course, what did we do? We headed right to the Arab lands and the West Bank. We somehow made it through the various barricades and said, come on, let's go for an adventure into the land of Araby. At one point, we stopped where there was a village that had been abandoned. And we got out of our car and we walked around and we went into these little mud huts. And in them, we could see children's pamphlets and books that had been written on school things. And somehow or another, this whole village of hundreds of homes had been abandoned. And we could only wonder what had happened that caused such a thing with all the turmoil of the Middle East. It was sad, and it really took your breath away to think that whole villages would be abandoned for whatever reason. And there they were, ghost towns of a time gone by. We make it to the palm trees of Jericho. And it was here that we really relished in that fantastic Arabic hospitality. These people have such a penchant to welcome you and to bring you into their homes. They're fascinated by foreign people. And the hubbly-bubblies, smoking tobacco, but the long tubes smoking out of water pipes, giving us oranges. And we wind up spending the night in a low area outside the town of Jericho. And as we do, it's a beautiful starlit night on the desert. And we look out, and as we fall asleep, the clouds came in, and we had a little sprinkle. But it was just a lovely place to be. The next day, Henk offers me his down sleeping bag. He says, Steve, it's cold in the desert. At night, the temperatures plummet. And he let me have his down mummy bag. Now, that was a big deal. We said farewell to Henk, and here I am with Donna, the Australian nurse, attractive young lady, and with another attractive young lady, Lynn from Maryland. And it's just me and these two young ladies. And it makes things easy. You can hitchhike well. The people, the Israeli army people, were very welcome to pick us up, especially when you had the young ladies with you. And then before Henk left, we also went to Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, it beckoned. When you're in Israel, you know, Jerusalem, the old city, that's really where you want to be ultimately. So we got up on a Sunday morning and went in that direction to get a few things done. So it's back to Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem was a place where we went to give blood. And that was exciting. We ran around and people were adventuring with us. And then we decided we better get some hashish because we didn't have any. We wanted to have some of that beautiful Lebanese hashish. Now that was a real adventure. We found some kid, he couldn't have been 12 years old, said, I get hashish, come with me. So we had to give him money ahead of time. And the man in the cafe where we were sitting, he said, oh, you trust him, he's fine, he's a good boy, he make you hashish. So we gave him some money, I think 10 Israeli liras, about $3. And we were waiting for him to come back and bring us these, what we call fingers of hashish. The hashish came in 250 gram sacks, they called them. It was actually a white cloth sack with a cinched tie on it. And they would take it and they would cut the strips off of it, and each one was called a finger, like your baby finger. And we were waiting for him to bring us back 2 fingers for $3. When he came back, he brought us these 2 skinny little fingers. I said, wait a second, this is not enough. And we started chasing him through the streets of Jerusalem. You come here back, you kid. We're screaming and yelling at this kid because we felt we had been ripped off. You know, you got to stand up for yourself. And bargaining in the Arabic places is quite a challenge. And somehow or another, that little weasel just made a way out of there. And we got stuck with these 2 little skinny fingers. Well, at least it was something to make our days more fun, because this Lebanese hashish was absolutely delicious, fun to smoke. It was very uplifting, and it made you feel very, very good. It wasn't just like regular stuff. It had a certain kind of a well-being about it. The honey-colored hashish from Lebanon that was somehow making it across the border over and over again to keep the Israelis happy, and of course, the visitors. Let's turn to the map. It's always good to get your bearing. So if you see it right now, you can see we came from the north and we came down through the West Bank, through these towns, and then we wound up going to Jericho. We'll show you that. Here's Jericho. And these towns are very close together. It's only about 30 miles from Jericho to Jerusalem. And from there, you can get to the Dead Sea. And in fact, one day, in these first few days, Henk in his little green daff drove us over to the Dead Sea, the salty, crazy sea. And we made our way to the sea, and Hank and I jumped in. We weren't wearing much of anything. The girls stayed by the side and watched us, and we floated in the Dead Sea, the heavy salt. You couldn't sink if you wanted to. And we laughed and laughed. We pretended we were reading a newspaper, just laying back. Couldn't drown, just hanging out, enjoying ourselves. We got out of there, we're coated with salt, and we had to get somewhere to get ourselves rinsed off, which wasn't easy. Then, of course, the Israeli soldiers came. They threw us out. They said, you go here, you go there. And it was a very kind of a controlled environment because the Israeli soldiers were kind of on your case to make sure you didn't get in the way of their security missions. And the Dead Sea was a big part of it. And you can see it's kind of large and it's very, very salty. It's really like the lowest place on earth. And we really enjoyed being in that area. It was very barren and it was very desert-like. Even though it was still the winter and there had been the rainy season, it was still a dry and desolate place. We went from there, we went to Jerusalem to give our blood. We came back, and again, we wound up another night outside of Jericho in the same field. We actually spent 3 nights in a row in the same field. It was a joy and a pleasure. Then we'd go back into the city during the day. We rented bicycles. We drove around. We had a ball. And of course, the Arab hospitality was unbelievable. You never felt better in your life the way these people treated you. It was just fantastic. This, of course, is a place of history. Everywhere you went, whether it be Herod's palace from the Romans, or here we could see the baptismal site of Jesus Christ. So you had the Christian things, you had the Islamic things, you had the Jewish and the Israel things, and there it was all over the place. History was making its way into your very blood. You couldn't turn to the right or left without seeing an historical site, something that was something you'd heard of, or maybe you should have heard of, and it made a way of really feeling history coming through your very veins. Next week, we'll continue on our ventures and adventures in the land of Israel, the land of the Arabic West Bank, and visiting the various locations, including, again, to Jerusalem, and then going to Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. And then me and my young lady friends going down along the Dead Sea, towards a place called Masada. Somewhere along the line, well, Donna, she somehow lost her money, and we lost her, and Lynn and I, O'Connor, we just kept on going. And there I was with this nice young lady, and it just kind of happened. And we will see that next week, we're going to have some great adventure as we go along the road down to the town of Eilat, down on the Dead Sea. And the adventure will get quite exciting, as you'll see next week.
He pulls off the road just outside of Jericho, driving us deeper into the desert. Then he stops and we get out and unload our gear. I am out in the desert with Hank, Lisa, and Donna. Each of us are soon snuggled into our own sleeping bags. Out in the barren desert landscape, the night sky is crystal clear with a field of stars shining bright. I've heard it said that Jericho is believed to be one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities of the world. Jericho is ancient to the ancients. It is well known to the Judeo-Christian traditions as the place of the Israelites' return from bondage by the Pharaoh Ramses in Egypt, led by Joshua, the successor to Moses. Joshua led the battle for Jericho and knocked down the walls. We wake up in the chilly morning on the desert plateau at daybreak. We are within a short distance of Jericho. We are in the West Bank of the Palestinian territories, less than a kilometer from the Jordan River. We roll up our sleeping bags and head into Jericho for some breakfast. Hank parks and we walk through the palm tree-laden town from the desert, arriving in an oasis. Springs of flowing water and greenery are everywhere, in such contrast to the dry sand landscape. The people in town, the local natives, welcome us with open arms, tea, dinner, and toast on a hubbly-bubbly. The smoking apparatus is a huge water pipe with long, flexible tubes that extends outward for smoking, usually tobacco and sometimes hashish. We spend the day roaming the streets in spaced-out wonder. The Arab hospitality is great, again and again. Each time we stop to eat and drink, we are treated like royalty. More food, more drinks, and more hubbly-bubbly. What a day.